Hello, guys. Hello. Hello, colleagues who have joined us recently, and thank you all who have been staying with us from previous talk. It's Blockchain Community Day 2023, and we are happy to see you, all of you. And our next speaker is Mr. Vasili Paulau, CEO of Spatium, expertise in wallet development, white label, of crypto wallets based on multi-party computation and privacy-first facial biometric systems. With the topic of today, common mistakes businesses making when connecting their products to Web3. This talk aims to discuss the main problems one might face when launching a product within Web3, creating and choosing the crypto wallet. Please notice that the session is being recorded and recording will be available in a week after the session. You can leave your questions on the agenda page. We'll read your questions you may direct to Vasily in the end of presentation. And now, without further ado, Mr. Vasily, the floor is yours.
Yeah, thanks. That's a huge pleasure to be here today to give and provide an understanding of how to connect businesses to Web3, which comes from classic Web2. And yeah, that's a great pleasure for me to be here today. So the thing I want to start with before going to the presentation, yes, I'm Vasily. I'm CEO of Spatium, the company which basically makes wallet as a service. And what we see from our expertise is that an experience is that there is a huge industry, and I am sure that the majority of the audience today is well aware of the market size and all the opportunities Web3 brings to us all, basically, and how it changed the paradigm of how the Internet of future should look like. However, for those who are not really aware, Web3 is expanding, and it's basically reinvents the privacy in a manner that if we speak about Web2, we gave a privacy for a great UX to the large corporations, and Web3 brings this process to the beginning, where the end users are then once more regaining their privacy over the data and the assets they have. And that's basically what the Web3 is about. So about your being like self-sovereign and so on and so forth. And in fact, there's tons of opportunities which currently Web3 offers. And we see a major interest from Web2 companies who keep asking the question, okay, I have a working product from Web2. Where do I start? So what's the entry point here? How to enter Web3? How can I issue, for instance, an NFT collection to my retail business, for instance, for anything they offer? And that's a huge problem, because there is no evident start guide where to start. So where is the entry point? So what we see from this perspective is there are several mistakes businesses make when entering Web3. And the first and the foremost is, especially for those who are only joining or only creating their product, is a good old stuff when they do not understand their audience and try to bring a Web3 value to the audience, for instance, that does not need an access to Web3. So before you are moving to Web3, you should really be aware of what is there any sort of value or problems you might solve for the audience of yours. And if the answer is yes, that's maybe the first green flag for you. Okay, so there is some value I can bring to my product, connecting it to Web3 for my end users, solve some of their pain points, or to gain certain advantage comparing me to, for instance, to my competitors. However, you should also take into account all of the risks which come when entering a Web3 connection. So it starts from all of the blockchain specific stuff, such as PK management, private key management, a tons of phishing and scams, which are currently, unfortunately, are there in Web3, as well as regulatory uncertainties. There is currently huge problems with UX, and that's one of the reasons the majority is still not there, as well as interoperability and privacy concerns. The majority of those risks I will address during the presentation, but the key thing in mind, be well aware about the users you have, what their needs are, and how a Web3 connection might suit you here and solve some of such stuff. And the second point is, before entering the Web3, and there are some projects who do that, they go right away building their wallet without fully understanding the architecture. And that's indeed a problem, because in the majority of cases we've seen, you do not even require to build a wallet, and that's one of the mistakes I'll talk on a later slide. But you should be really aware, at least, of the high level of the blockchain technologies. So without that, it's pretty impossible to create a good working product within the industry. So starting from what a blockchain is, what are the smart contracts, which basically are programs running on blockchain, as well as what is a decentralized application, nodes and wallets. After you are able to understand all this stuff, you then dive deeper into the wallets comparison, or whether it's enough to launch a DApp for your business. And that's pretty it. So a good way to start is to jump in the much of the articles which are there on YouTube, on Medium, or videos on YouTube, which give a basic and good understanding about Web3, how it differs from Web2, what is the key essence here, and that's really important. And the third mistake is basically building the wallet. So from what we've seen, the majority of the product which come from Web2, they even do not need a wallet to start. So, of course, one thing you should always bear in mind, that each end user in any way should have a ideally non-custodial wallet to connect to Web3. Ideally non-custodial, because if you follow the paradigm of Web3, you try and breathe this value. So in form of the non-custodial means that the user himself has the control over the assets and all of the on-chain data. But the problem is that the majority of such products, it's enough to launch your DApp, but not the wallet, which will save you tons of resources. And through a DApp, you will be able, for instance, to provide an access to all of the end users you have through the connection protocols, and invite them, for instance, to download other non-custodial wallets available on the market. And this is, in fact, one of the options the majority of the businesses who come to Web2 that they should consider. So launching your own wallet from start might be not the best idea for you, and not the ideal situation. Even if you take into account the larger projects which are already successful, as for instance OneInch or Zerion or Uniswap, if you see how they approach such an issue, is that on first they were launched as DApps, basically, and covered their functionality within the decentralized applications. And only on the later stage, when their product was already successful, they had a significant user base, they moved to creation of a non-custodial wallet. And that's the reasonable path, in fact, because you should focus on the functionality and the unique value you want to offer, and on a later stage come to the wallet development, because the wallet development path is not an easy one. So, for instance, we've been developing wallets since 2017, and what we've seen is that, as mentioned before, UX is a problem because you have so many technical limitations. You have so many problems with infrastructure. Then if you just jump in the wallet development, you will not be able to provide and focus on your unique value proposition and to present it in a better way. And that's why one of the things you should consider is, of course, the app launch rather than building a wallet. Maybe the hardest point here is using outdated technologies. So if you consider the stage at which the blockchain technology is now comparing to where it was in its early days, there is a huge progress in this respect. So the many classic, I would say, technologies that were already adopted and tested within Web2 on the later stage came to Web3. One of them is multi-party computation, about which I will talk on a later slide. But so far, for instance, even if you decide, okay, I don't want a DApp, I want to launch my own non-custodial wallet, the thing you should consider is launching the wallet based not on the private key itself. Because if we speak about the private key and how the things are going now with that, it's a problem, because I don't believe that we are able to invite 1 billion of people join Web3 with a seed phrase and a private key management. And if you look at the top wallets on the market, they're trying to provide a certain alternative to the seed phrase and the private key itself. So it can be rather multi-party computation or account abstraction, if we speak about how they deal with the private key itself, or it can be social recovery, biometrics, or even access to your centralized accounts such as Google, Facebook, Twitter, and etc. to make a recovery process an easier one. So you should look at an alternative. So far in 2023, launching a wallet based on a private key signature itself is already not the best way to create a product that will get into the hearts of the end users. Because of the reasons which are basically security. So there is one point of failure, here on the screen, I have an example of the Lord of the Rings, where basically a private key is the ring which the hobbits, by having that, they put it into lava and the whole security of Mordor failed. And that's the essence, that's the problem. If someone at any point of the life of your wallet will get an access to the private key, all of the security you've made beforehand will fail, and that's truly a problem. And the answer to that is a stack of technologies which I mentioned before. So one of that might be the multi-party computation, and you might consider it. So it's not a technology that was invented within the Web3. So it's been already tested within a classic internet, and it's a pretty working technology. However, it was adapted to the usage within the Web3. And that's basically what we did in 2017 when we created an MPC protocol for a non-custodial wallet. The way it works is that, let's assume you have a private key, and what you do is that you it would not be a proper way to say, but you are divided in several shards without creating the private key itself. So instead of having a one thing to sign a transaction, you have several of them. For instance, 2 out of 2. So you have 2 shards both on the separate devices. It can be two mobile phones, or for instance, mobile phone and a server, or watch, smartwatches, etc. And they together sign a transaction. In such a scheme, there is no private key itself involved. It exists. It's called a phantom private key, but it does not generate it on either of the devices used within the signing scheme process. And in such a way, what you are able to do is that you are able to have more than one point of failure. For instance, if one device is being compromised, you have a second device which will not, for instance, co-sign the transaction, and by thus the attacker will not get an access to the funds. The more complicated schemes of the multi-party computation give you also an access to change the shards which were previously issued. So for instance, if we take scheme 3 out of 5, let's assume one of the shards were compromised, and within a certain manner, you are able, within the agreement of the other shards within the scheme, to change the shards and to reissue them to all of the users. In such a way, you have a tons of flexibility in terms of security. And one of the things the multi-party computation is also known for is that it's called a stealth signature. By stealth signature, it means from the blockchain perspective, the transactions which are signed by the multi-party computation look like a transaction signed by a regular private key wallet. However, beneath that, off-chain, the amount of parties who co-sign the transaction might be significantly different. So for instance, you might have 7 people who co-sign the transaction, but on the blockchain perspective, you will see only one single solid transaction. And that's what some of the businesses might consider beneficial for them if, for instance, they do not want to indicate all of the parties involved in the transaction signature scheme. As well as multi-party computation brings another opportunity, or let's say another model of how the private key management might work. And that's what in some of the resources is called the share model. So within a classic private key, you had the two options. One of them is a non-custodial, where, for instance, I hold my private key at my side, and thus I'm fully responsible for its security and for signing the transactions. And that's one of the UX you can build around that. The other one was to, the private key is located at certain centralized entity, let's say an exchange, for instance, Binance or any other one. And that entity is a trusted one, licensed, which I trust the storage of my funds. I gave the control over the private key to them, but instead I gained a better UX. And the MPC allows to change this paradigm in a way that by having multiple shards which are involved in the transaction scheme, you are now able, for instance, to create a scheme where a business co-signs the transaction. So one of the shards might be located at my disposal and another one on the business side. By thus, together, they form a transaction. None of them is being able to initiate the transaction without a co-signing party. And this is more like a hybrid scheme. From the regulatory perspective, if there is a certain guarantor who will make sure that none of the shards will fail, this scheme might be regarded as non-custodial because business does not have a full access to the funds without the user initiating the transaction. From another point, business by co-signing transaction may introduce any policies which the user should follow for the transaction to be co-signed and sent to the blockchain. This might be any KYC or IML policies the business might want to introduce. So let's say I will co-sign the transaction only if it complies with my IML purposes. If you do not want to follow them, okay, go grab your private key and regenerate it. I provide you the second shard, we generate the private key, and you go to any non-custodial wallet. That's some of the opportunities it offers. As well as within such a scheme, you as a business, you are able to provide a far better UX in terms of how the wallet might look like. Because by having a second shard at your disposal, And by distributing the security together with the user, you are able to introduce alternative options for instance, for client-side shard backup. It can be, for instance, biometrics, which have been already adopted to a certain level for non-custodial wallets, where, for instance, the user stores an encrypted version of the first shard in their, for instance, Google Drive, and it's encrypted by a key which is stored on the side of the biometric vendor. And biometric vendor provides a key to unencrypt this shard only after the user completes the liveness test. And there are tons of schemes, in fact, which made a user's life simpler. And that's why you might consider MPC, and especially the shared model scheme within your potential wallet you might want to build. But that's for MPC. When we talk about the other alternative to that, it might be an account abstraction. So just in brief, it's pretty similar to what MPC does, but that occurs on chain. So in the form of smart contract, you are able to firstly to change the access credentials to your wallet. For instance, you can come to a smart contract wallet and say, okay, I present you my private key, and that confirms that I'm the owner of this wallet. But on the next attempt, I want you to log in me not through this private key, but through, for instance, my Google account and the key which will be stored there. And by thus, you are able to change the private key itself and to remove it out of the calculations of the asset storage. And that's one of the points where account abstraction might significantly change the UX for the businesses who are potentially looking for the wallet development. In such a way, you might offer any suitable mechanisms for access recovery within your business, and you're also able to establish additional policies on chain, since your wallet is basically a smart contract. Another thing account abstraction brings to life is that it is operatable cross-chain and it's blockchain agnostic, because you have a smart contract which might look on any other chains without taking into account the blockchain specifics. And in such a way, you might have a smart contract being launched on a one chain, for instance, on Ethereum, but still it might look on all of the chains and operate the assets there. And that's the benefit of that. So that's what you might eventually consider. If we compare all of the stack of technologies, that's basically it. So what we do offer and we do recommend is look on the smart wallets or account abstraction wallets, or the multi-party computation, because comparing to the benefits they offer, they are step ahead of what we had back then in 2014 or 2015. There are a few things which they changed in terms of the UI UX. One of them, the ones mentioned, security policies, is that you are able not only to change, let's say, how your private key or your wallet is accessed. You're able to change the backup mechanisms, but you are also able to somehow change the situation with the limits, for instance, or a second factor usage, and so on and so forth. You are also able, on top of both technologies, to create a gas-free service where the user will not need a native coin to send a token. And that's a huge pain. So, for instance, the majority of the people who joined the Web3, and when they receive, for instance, USDT for their wallet, they're not able to send it if they have no Ethereum or any native coin which is required to send the transaction. And you need to go find an on-ramp to buy that, and only then to transfer the funds. And it might take a huge time and effort from the part of the end user. And that's what you also need to consider if you want to bring your wallet to the market. As well as there are additional points which emphasize for a better usage of such technologies. The fifth mistake the majority of the businesses make is an overcomplication of the integrations. So if you take a wallet as your entity, so you should bear in mind that there is a certain must-have functionality which is required for the wallet to function. That's basically sending and receiving the transaction, storage of the sign-in mechanism if it's a more private key related stuff. But still, the unique value of your product will be built on top of that, so on top of the wallet infrastructure itself. But after you reach a certain feature you want to build, or it's already there are different ways of how you might integrate that. So if we speak about the Web2 feature, a classic, like for instance, I don't know, issuing of a virtual cards within your product. In such a way, it's only possible through a direct integration of such a feature inside your wallet. However, if we speak about a DApp, for instance, you have a tons of alternatives. So there is a DApp browser which you might offer, which basically might cover and give an access for the users to all of the DApps which are there on the blockchain. You might introduce a certain connection protocols which will give an access to the DApps from your wallets. For instance, it can be a wallet connector or any other you choose. And the final, it might be a direct integration. From the expertise we have from our own product and the product launched through us by our partners, we see that every business should be very conscious with the direct integrations, because the more direct integrations of the end features you have, the harder it for you to support that. And if a certain change occurs on the side of the feature development part, you should either update it, and if you have more direct integrations that you can possibly handle, that's a huge pain. So try to be very accurate in terms of considering which integrations should be there and how you should handle those. The 6 mistakes basically concerns the infrastructure itself. It's not only enough to launch to manage the private key management part or a smart wallet management part. You also need to provide data on that. So you need to have a certain infrastructure for the wallet to work. And there is a huge number of things you should bear in mind. So for instance, for the wallet to work, you need to give an access to the nodes to send a transaction, or you should consider launching your own node architecture. That's basically not a good part if you have a starting product or a small one, because there are a number of huge businesses which can do that for you. You might also need a blockchain commission estimation parts, because some of the blockchains, the majority of blockchains, in fact, you need a certain commission estimation to send a transaction, and it's not set up by blockchain. And it might change depending on how the blockchain is currently loaded. You need to get data on the assets. So basically, somewhere place to grab all the data regarding the metadata of the assets, their smart contracts, even the icons of those. You need the fiat to crypto rates and much more stuff for the wallet to operate. And you not only need to launch those services, but you need to make sure they work in a stable way, because we are currently speaking about launching your own wallet, and that's a financial instrument. So let's assume you launch your product as a wallet, and a part of functionality of yours, parts of the wallet functionality, and at a certain point, for instance, the transaction cannot go live. And that's a huge pain, because, for instance, if you have like thousands of people using that and they are not being able to send the transactions, you're totally not in the right way. So and that's why you should care a lot about the stability of your product, about its scalability and flexibility. So you need to solve somehow the issues of your SRE team, which will manage all of the integrations up there, as well as all the infrastructure points. You need to make sure that you have a certain service level agreements with all of the third-party providers, which up there inside your wallet product. And as well as you have a certain BCDR concept and answers to that and policies in terms of what happens if what. So yeah, there is a tons of stuff you need to consider in terms of the infrastructure. And without the clear understanding how to solve each of them, we do not really recommend launching such a hard product. It may be a huge pain for you, for your end users, and for the success of your product. The final mistake I want to talk about is basically building the wallet yourself. So from what we see is that indeed a wallet development might take forever. So even if you start from like a basic wallet functionality, a huge time is required to build a proper UX, and you need to have a team with a great expertise in the blockchain technology. Otherwise, the majority of the UX you will build will not suit the Web3 specifics. You need a significant time to test that and to make sure that you have enough SRE team to cover all the infrastructure services you've introduced inside the wallet. And if we compare that to creating a wallet with a wallet as a service company, there is a huge difference. In science, they say that there are different infinities. One can be smaller, some can be larger than that. And if you compare the wallet development within the wallet as a service and within making it fully yourself, there is a difference in that time. And that's what you also must consider. There are currently a number of companies who offer wallet as a service, and they do the majority of the work for you. And that's basically one of the reasons you might consider launching your own wallet. So let's assume you have a certain functionality, especially coming from Web2, which you want to introduce inside within the Web3. And such functionality really benefits from having your own wallet. For instance, you have a community that is really keen of the wallet you want to introduce. Or let's assume that the feature you want to bring to life is not compatible with the, like, let's say it's DApp paradigm, and you need your own wallet. So within such an idea, it's beneficial for you to look for a wallet as a service and at least consider wallet as a service companies, is because they cover all of the basics of the wallet creation, where you are now able to focus more on your unique functionality. So if it's a certain Web2 feature, you will have an already made, for instance, let's say SDK for a crypto wallet coming from the wallet as a service company. And you are more focused on how to, based on that, to create a certain value for the end users of yours. So for instance, as I mentioned before, for instance, add a virtual credit card to the equation. And that's why you might consider that. Another thing is that Web3 is always changing. So currently there wasn't a hype on NFTs. It changes. We soon will have certain other technologies which are appearing up there. So for instance, a bunch of people are speaking about soul-bound tokens, which were launched the previous year. So now everyone is talking about the ZKs and how they might change the way we operate with the data, as well as the account abstraction. And if you use a wallet as a service company, the majority of the issues and even the integrations, as for instance, the wallet connect changed from version 1 to version 2, and you need a new integration of that. And that's basically all of such questions might be covered by the wallet as a service company. And that's what you might consider in terms of time and resources you want to spend on your end product. Just to sum up, so let's create a summary here. So to create from the experience we had in terms of the wallet creation, from all of the customers we had, we see that you need to take into account 7 steps before you launch your own wallet and connect it to the Web3. Of course, there are more of them, and it's not so easy just to say, okay, 7 of those complete, I'm ready to go. No, the end product and connection to Web3 is not such an easy part. But at least if you consider the majority of them, the chances that you will launch a successful product increase far more than if you do not have a clear understanding of those. So you need to understand your users and whether they need the Web3 connectivity and whether it can somehow improve your product or the product understanding. So you need to have a clear vision about Web3 architecture and how it works. You should also consider connection to Web3 without a wallet. So as mentioned before, it can be done, for instance, within a DApp integration. So for instance, you will release your functionality as a DApp, and by thus, no wallet is required from your end. The users will use other wallets to connect to your DApp, and that's the way they will use that. So you need to use up-to-date technologies. As mentioned before, on the field, you have tons of them, so such as account abstraction, MPC. There is a huge use of biometrics currently, ZKs, NFT support, different standards, so on and so forth. And that's what on a later date Wallet as a Service can do for you and offer a better solution for you. You should make integrations reasonably. So if you consider integrating a certain feature, you should need a clear understanding of what time and resources your team will spend to support that, how this feature might change in the future, and what such changes might influence on your product. So only after answering such questions, you will have a vision of how to integrate that, for instance, through a DApp integration or direct integration inside your product, as well as some of the features you might consider bringing to a later date because they might require a significant amount of resources to be able to be supported within your application. You should always care about the infrastructure, because if you want to step into the wallet market and launch the product of yours within that, you should really have a clear answer to all of the questions regarding the stability, security, and flexibility of the product you offer. So without a full team which will cover all of those aspects, it's quite a risky part to launch a non-custodial wallet, because rather than having a successful product, you will face reputational risks, as well as you might be sued if you're be not able to get an access to your end users to their funds. And final is to consider a wallet as a service, which can do the majority of the job for the wallet creation for you, where you will be able to focus on your unique functionality, rather than developing the wallet from scratch and spending the tons of amount of resources, hiring like expensive developers with a certain expertise, which even sometimes is not a question about the money. So the very unique developers which fully understand the whole Web3 architecture and can deliver up-to-date technologies, they are not even on the market. And that's one of the problems which might be solved through the wallet as a service integration. The final part is when to build the wallet. And we have like two advices here. One is that, let's say you've been already connected to Web3 through a DApp, for instance. And on a certain level, when you reach a success with your product, you see that launching your own wallet might bring you additional source of monetization or user retention. And that might be the point where you should launch your own non-custodial wallet, let's say it this way. Because at this stage, you have already a working and operating business within the Web3, and you just bring additional value to that. And it totally makes sense comparing the logic of how the non-custodial wallets were introduced by the industry leaders. Another thing is that if you believe that comparing the cost of the wallet development, if they are low, and the wallet provides reasonable benefit for you and for your, for instance, initial release, that might be additional point targeting you to focus on the wallet creation. So yeah, that's basically two advices. So if you have a working business within Web3 and it's bring value, okay, that's a point. And another, if the costs are low but the value is significant, you might choose this path, or at least if you're not having other alternatives to launch the wallet within the Web3, to launch the product within the Web3 without having a non-custodial wallet. So that's it for today. I tried to, like, in brief, cover what the businesses coming from Web2 might find there connecting to the Web3, and what challenges they might face. Of course, this list is not exhaustive, and there are tons of other stuff which goes beyond that. But at least I hope some of you will be able to have a certain vision of how the wallet work within the Web3, of what technologies you should consider, as well as what things you should bear in mind when considering whether to launch your own non-custodial wallet, or at least to launch a DApp, or at least at which stage you should do that. So I'll be happy to answer all of the questions you might have, or even if you're not able to do that within this discussion, please feel free to email me or to find me in LinkedIn, and I will be pleased to talk.
Nice. Well, there are a lot of things to discuss on this presentation. It's very deep. I appreciated that because you focus a lot on the wallet development and building, because I think it's the entry point, the main entry point for the dApps to interact with the end users. And something that Alexei is asking, and I think it's a very interesting question. He asks if you think it's true that good user experience for Web3 is still missing. So because we are tech savvy people, we are developers, we can understand uh, easily how to interact with those applications. For example, when MetaMask had the problem with Infura, it was easy for me to change their RPC, etc. But maybe somebody that's not very tech savvy can have some issues. So how can we try to improve this user experience to make Web3 more accessible for the end users?
Yeah, that's a great question, Jose. In fact, that's what I've been talking about the using up-to-date technologies. So the majority of those questions, if you, for instance, take the account abstraction and the smart wallet, it might completely change the UX of the wallet development, of the UX for the end user. So we remove the complex seed phrases starting from that. You can always, you do not, you with the smart wallet, you are no longer being forced to choose, for instance, a single wallet provider, because your wallet is basically located on the on the blockchain. And by thus, you're able, for instance, to use even Google Authenticator to access the wallet. And another part comes to how the certain benefits are managed within such a wallet. And here the UI might change. So I believe the future of Web3, what we will see is that it doesn't matter whether we will have account abstraction or the multi-party computation, which will deal with the transaction signing part. But what I expect is that the majority of the things will come more to the wallet being just an interface rather than transaction signing scheme. So, for instance, you will come to the products, for instance, Web3 Neobank. You will have your own for instance, smart wallet on or MPC account there, not their specific account, but your universal account. You just log in with your universal account to their service, use the UI, use the logic and UX, but still use their features. But you do not have to care about the security and etc. This is covered on a blockchain level or on a provider level, which will do that for you. And that's completely changed the landscape, because I myself have 7 wallets that I regularly use, and that's a huge pain for me to make sure that I will not lose the backup for all of them. And that's not what majority will enjoy, in fact.
Yeah. To write down all those seed phrases, that's
Yes.
a lot of trouble, but it is what it is. No? We need to save our money in our investments, and that was a very good conversation. I think we still have a couple of minutes, but Alex is asking what sort of business will enter Web3 first and faster, if we can comment about that, in your opinion.
Yeah, so what we see is that financial market is currently actively looking for Web3. We see a huge request from the part of the neobanks and classic banks who want to jump in. Retail is not yet there. So we see there are many companies who try to play with NFTs, for instance, and that's maybe some of the giants up there, like shoes companies and etc.
Yeah.
But still, there is not so wide adoption within the retail. We expect that somewhere near next year or 2025, the retailers will join, but this wholly depends on the regulations. If the regulations will somehow change or state adequately how the crypto should be approached, or even if they will launch, and that's one of the possible ways they will launch their own cryptocurrencies. That's what the majority of the states are currently also doing in parallel. That might completely change the landscape. So far, retailers are not there. More of the big companies are looking at that, or those who are already building within the Web3.
Okay. So we don't have more time, unfortunately. We have to go. Thank you very much, Vasily. Thank you to all of you guys who watched this, and see you next time. Bye
Yeah,
bye.
thanks. Bye,
Thank you.
everyone.
Bye bye.